And I'm back. Welcome back to the only podcast that in this day and age is only hosted by one doctor. That's me, Dr. Silverstein. This is Doctors Not Doctors. This week we will be looking at the Mandelson Files release in the UK, where Starmer seems to be in a bit of trouble. We'll also be looking at the PMQs battle from last week. And finally, we'll be looking at the ever-expanding war in Iran. So first, we should probably discuss why you're only hearing me and not the mellifluous tones of Dr. Armshaw. He is away for a few days, and we decided that it's better to keep the podcast going in a bit of a regular schedule, and he'll be back probably next week to bring all of his joy and intelligence to these proceedings. So we're going to try an interesting one, and we're just going to have me for a shorter amount of time because obviously there's just myself. So let's talk about Mandelson and the release of the Mandelson Files. This is a growing and continuing problem for the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Now, if you haven't remembered or don't remember, Peter Mandelson is a member of the House of Lords who was a very old Labour figure from back in the 90s. He's been central to the new Labour project of the past almost 30 years now. But he's not been a saint of a person. He is mired in scandal, whether it be there was this thing called cash for passports. Then there was an issue about a loan that he was accused of getting or giving. That part was happened before I moved here in almost 17 years ago. But what happened this week was the result of a House of Commons resolution, which came in the form of a opposition day. And the Conservative Party basically demanded all information on the appointment of Peter Mandelson to his position as the ambassador to the U.S. from the United Kingdom. And the UK government, led by Starmer, pushed back just a little bit because they didn't want to release anything that had to do with anything about national security. And there was a big fight in the Commons about what national security meant. And eventually they came to the compromise in that debate that national security matters would be put to the Intelligence and Security Committee and not to the House directly. And personally had some issue with that because the nature of the Intelligence and Security Committee, number one being that it is controlled by the Prime Minister. People tend to forget that. But this week on Wednesday, the information came out about what the government knew about Peter Mandelson before he was appointed. And there were some very big red flags that were put into that, into the information that the Prime Minister would have seen. Primary among them is that he maintained a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after he was accused and put in jail for the crimes that he'd committed in 2008. And I believe he had stayed in Epstein's house well after that. All of this is documented in the files, which is more important because you have to remember that Keir Starmer was the director of public prosecutions, the top lawyer in the land, basically. And the fact that he either overlooked this or ignored this is a huge issue. Now, it has come out that he didn't ignore them. He just never directly talked to Mandelson before his appointment, which is a whole nother issue and on its own. These files also show it happened after Mandelson was kicked to the curb. Mandelson wanted a £500,000 payout, and which would be about what he would have earned if he had had a full 5 years in position as U.S. ambassador. Additionally, it showed that there was somebody who was already in line and already in place, that the Foreign Office are basically, they already had an ambassador in the United States or the United Kingdom. And that person was just basically told, there's the curb, kick rocks. So it was definitely a choice made by the government to put him in there. But it's apparently the Prime Minister didn't even talk to him before making this very pivotal appointment. Also, you'd see that there's no contrition in any of these documents. He doesn't really care that he is, remained friends with this horrible person, that he remained friends with this sex trafficker. And as you can see from the letters that he put out, sorry, not put out, the letters that came out from the Epstein files, he still wanted to be friends with him because who knows? I don't know. I've never met Peter Mandelson, and I doubt that I ever will. But the stories that I hear about him are pretty clear that he's a schmoozer, gets as close to power as humanly possible, and then, holds on for dear life, which explains how he got into the position of being the ambassador to the United States. But another interesting part of these files was that he actually wanted Nigel Farage to advocate for the United Kingdom to Trump as opposed to anyone else, which I am just absolutely shocked at the fact that they would go to somebody like Farage and say, hey, we are political enemies, but we need you to help advocate for the United Kingdom to Trump. Now, I don't know how you thought that was going to go, but I can tell you right now that the only times that Farage has gone to America, he has never spoken well of the United Kingdom. He has never spoken well of the UK government. He has only ever asked the US to punish the UK on things like the Online Safety Act and other things. He's also declared that there's no free speech in the United Kingdom, which is a surprise to me, given that this podcast is put out in the United Kingdom, and I have yet to have anyone come to my door. So the lack of foresight on the part of the UK, the Labour Party, the UK Prime Minister, whatever you'll have, is really, really, really bad. And you would have thought that this would have been brought forward at Prime Minister's questions last week, but the UK government decided to put out all this information after 12 o'clock, which means that it came out after Prime Minister's questions, which is interesting because Prime Minister's questions is it's becoming this weird battle. It's always a battle. It's a political battle. It's an oratory battle. But when you have Kimmy Badenoch and Keir Starmer, two very different kinds of people fighting each other, you've just got this interesting, ridiculous, logical, kind of almost dispassionate Keir Starmer versus this high school bully, Kimmy Badenoch, trying to take digs at each other. And for the first time this week, I saw a kind of political Keir Starmer and a political Kimmy Badenoch going at each other, having two very separate conversations at the same time. So in Prime Minister's questions this week, Kimmy Badenoch wanted to ask about fuel duty. Now, you might ask, why is she asking about fuel duty? Surely it has something to do with the Iranian War. Doesn't mention the war. It's not the primary part of her question, unless you're Keir Starmer, where Keir Starmer spends almost all of his time talking about, you wanted us to get deeper involved in this war. We are, we've dipped our toe in as much as we can, but every question that Kimmy would put out about fuel duty, he would throw back, we're talking, like, why don't you want to talk about the war anymore? Why don't you want to discuss the war? And it became this farce of it wasn't even a debate. It was what Prime Minister's questions is basically for. It's your opportunity to get your 10 seconds of a headline or your political line on television while people, accidentally graze by, or if they're on the news, they might catch, what you say, what they say, and they're never going to hear the context. So the Prime Minister, knowing that you're never going to hear the context, just threw out the lines that he wanted you to hear. And Kimmy Badenoch wanted you to also hear that, fuel duty was going up. Now, fuel duty in the United Kingdom isn't going up until potentially September, which is why this whole thing doesn't make any sense. But it also doesn't make any sense why she's not asking about this ongoing huge war. And, I'm trying to do my best James O'Brien impression here, trying not to do too many cuts, but you might hear one or two. It's the lack of seriousness from Badenoch here, where there's always, some opportunities to take a dig politically, but right now in this place, at this very dangerous juncture in the world, this isn't the time. This isn't the time to go after the Prime Minister because of his ability or inability to commit troops, planes, bombs, supplies, resources, whatever, to this insanity that America is doing. This is the issue that she has every week now. Now, of course, next week, I doubt that she will talk about the Iranian war, which she, oddly enough, she should, but because it's politics, she's not. She's going to talk about what came out in the Mandelson Files. And this is a problem for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer has said publicly to the effect of, I was never told. And then it was to the effect of, I never saw him. It just keeps on getting worse because he's trying to abdicate his own responsibility. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's going to be able to. And we're still in a position in Parliament where the Labour Party doesn't really have a replacement for him yet. So even if they wanted to get rid of him, they can't do it right now. There are elections coming up in May across England, across Scotland, and across Wales, where the Labour Party aren't polling ahead in any of those places. I think they recently in Scotland overtook Reform into second place, but it's a distant second place in Scotland. They are not in second place in Wales. I believe it's Reform in second place in Wales, and I don't know where they are across the different councils in England. What I do know is that they came in third in Manchester, in the Manchester by-election, which Green had won, and now the Green Party is seeing a massive resurgence. They have not really had a big political victory since 2024. So by any measurement, you first want to get rid of the person who led you to those things. Now, Morgan McSweeney apparently is one of those people. Apparently, Peter Mandelson is one of those people, and they're both on the out. So who's left? Who's left to take the hit for the impending doom of the upcoming election? It's going to be Starmer. So there's very little chance that Starmer is going to be the prime minister by the end of the year. But if he is, then he's a caretaker at best. But we'll have to wait and see how that goes. All right. Let's move towards the bigger issues of the world, which is the second week of the Iranian War. So this week, we've had 13 American deaths, 140 injuries, and over about 1,000 deaths across Iran. I think we need to discuss kind of shortly here where we are and where this could possibly go. I will, of course, say I am not a military strategist. I am not a military expert. But if we use a little bit of logic here, I think we need to we need to understand the very precarious nature of where we are and why this isn't the same as Iraq. This isn't the same as Afghanistan. This isn't the same as Venezuela or Nigeria. Now, why do I say Nigeria? Because America bombed Nigeria last year. I don't know if you remember that, but America bombed Nigeria. America kidnapped the president of Venezuela. Apparently, there's a oil embargo upon Cuba. Who knows? Cuba might be next. But Iran is a totally different beast. Where do we start? Let's start with the fact that I don't think anyone in the American administration has asked the following questions. Where does this hit us? Where does this come back on us? Now, let me explain where that's coming from. There's a movie called Margin Call. It's about the 2008 the housing market crisis, the mortgage-backed securities issue. And effectively, the issue is that kind of out of nowhere, somebody accidentally discovers that a particular bank, which is never named, has a ton of these bad mortgages basically on their books. So basically, they realize that at a certain point, if people stop paying their mortgages, the bank's going to lose all their money. They're going to go out of business. And we're talking about, and they realize this is kind of a systemic issue. And so they have a kind of an all-night meeting where people come up with ideas, and the CEO comes out, played by Jeremy Irons, and he's amazing. And he's like, what do we do? And the head of this particular group, which is Kevin Spacey, he basically says, we sell it all. We sell all of our mortgage-backed securities today. As in, you have 8 hours from 9 to 3 or whatever to sell everything that you have in your bank of these toxic securities and get them off your sheet so that when they do go bad, they've gone bad with somebody else. And I don't think it was Kevin Spacey who said that, actually. It was somebody else in the room who says, sell it all today. And then Jeremy Irons says, where does this come back at us? And Kevin Spacey says, everywhere, because he knows that when you sell the securities, you're going to destroy all of your relationships with all the people that you just sold to because you just sold them a flaming pile of dog shit. You know that they don't have the water to put it out, and they're always going to remember that you're the one who screwed them over. So that decision making had taken place before they had taken the bad decision, and they took the decision which was best for them, even though it screwed over everybody else. When it comes to this war, I am not seeing any indication that anyone's done that math for anyone other than Donald Trump. So let me explain, like, basically the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits of Hormuz, you may have heard about in the news over the past several days. It's where the oil comes out from Iran and to go into various parts of the world. It's incredibly narrow. There's basically one way in and one way out. And if it was me, I would have figured out a way to try to control that area before you start lobbing bombs everywhere and trying to kill everybody. And I understand that it's a very hard place to control because if you put your ships there, Iran can just fire their missiles from Iran and get you too. So you can't just drop your ships in the area. But I didn't see any form of planning when it comes to the way that the American government is actually handling this war. It started off with Trump illegally starting the war. Then he's done this by not going through Congress to get any authorization. He's also illegally killed a leader of a foreign government, which is against American law. No one really knows the true reason why he started the war because that constantly changes. The regime is still there. So unless it changes anytime soon, which doesn't look like it, you're now no longer in a short-term war. You're in a long-term war. And the terms of that war may quickly change from you determining what's happening to the Iranians determining what's happening. Now, how could that happen? Now, there's a couple of ways that happens. The first one is by making it harder for oil to leave the region. And one way for that to happen is by mining the Straits of Hormuz. And Iran has apparently started mining the Straits of Hormuz. You're seeing ships that are on fire that are passing through because depending on what kind of mine you're using, either your mine is lodged onto the seabed or it's just floating. And in my opinion, floating mines are going to be much more dangerous and scary because it's not like you can say, oh, well, don't sail in this particular area because there's, 600 mines or whatever. If they're just floating with the current, you'll never know. You'll never know where they're going to be. And that's clearly what's happened here. And insurers don't want their boats to blow up. So they're not going to let them sail until the area becomes safe. Now, at the beginning of the week, the Energy Secretary of the United States, a person whose name I don't know, I think it's Chris something. I'll look it up in a second. But the Energy Secretary of the United States put out a tweet saying the U.S. has successfully escorted a ship to the Straits of Hormuz, and that dropped the oil price immediately. He immediately retracted that tweet because it wasn't true. Now, Scott Bessent, who was recently on Sky News doing an interview, got pulled out of an interview with Sky News, and then went to the Situation Room, came back 2 hours later, looked like he had seen a ghost, couldn't speak, and apparently started to cry. He said that the U.S. government was going to escort naval ships through the Straits of Hormuz. I don't know where we are with that. That was a few days ago. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, if it's not going to happen. But this is what I mean by where does it come back at us? First, it comes back at the world through energy prices. Prices have already started to shoot up. It's near $5 a gallon for diesel fuel in America. The prices are rising here. I think I saw that 168 pence, or basically £1.68 for a liter. And it's, I think, 4 liters which makes a gallon. So do the math there. You're talking at almost 8 pounds a gallon or something like that's well over $10, between $12, $13 a gallon, just to fill up now. And that's with all the countries kind of trying to tap into their emergency resources. That's just in week 2. If this goes on for months and months and months and months and months, that price isn't going to go down anytime soon because that's where all the oil is. Where else does it come back at us? Well, it also comes back at us because militarily, the Trump administration is seemingly sending Marines into the area, about 2,000 of them, from what I understand, 2,000 Marines are heading into the area, and their position, the purpose there is question mark, right? Now, if you're sending in the Navy to escort ships and the Navy starts getting attacked, then that might give you the excuse to escalate the conflict, an excuse to escalate the conflict to the point where you may need to put boots on the ground. That's another place where it comes back and hits us, because even though MAGA was told there'll be no more forever wars, no more foreign wars, no more wars in the Middle East, we are getting closer to having people, American boots on the ground. Americans are already dying for this, and it doesn't seem to be shrinking. That threat doesn't seem to be going away. Another way that this comes back on the United States is that Iran is pretty good at terrorism. So it comes back on the United States unconventionally. Apparently, the West Coast of the United States is now on alert for potential sleeper cells that are floating around in the United States. And the thing is that you don't have to get an immediate reaction. So you don't have to directly attack us again, because everybody's going to know the difference. They could wait years, decades. It doesn't have to be right now. So the consequences of these actions may not be felt for years. And I don't think anyone's said to themselves, well, where does this come back at us? Well, we could have a terrorist attack, a serious terrorist attack. We don't know. But you would have hoped that somebody had at least planned that out. And then there's American embassies in the region have been attacked by missiles or drones or projectiles or something in the region. And we are under the impression that it was Russia that gave Iran the intelligence to find where those places were. At the same time, the U.S. government is releasing sanctions on the Russian regime so that they can sell more oil. So we are basically giving Russia a benefit. They are then taking that benefit and helping Iran, and Iran is attacking the United States. Finally, where does this come back at us? It's you have to remember that the United States is exceptionally expensive. We're fighting wars with exceptionally expensive equipment, and they're fighting us with exceptionally cheap equipment. My biggest fear, and this is my personal fear, is that if we start running out of the expensive equipment to take out their cheap equipment, I have no idea. I'm not a military expert, but what do they have? What do they have that they haven't used yet? If it was me and I was the underdog in this fight, and you're throwing all your cheap stuff at them first, all your pawns basically, and then they're throwing their pawns at you, and you're using your rooks and your knights and your bishops to take them out, and then they start coming out with their heavy stuff. I'm sure that people far better informed than I am have a good idea of what could be coming next. But do they ever think about where this lands, how this hits us? Where does this hit us? And my fear is that it just hits us everywhere. It hits us in our pocket. It hits us at home. It hits us where we sleep. It hits us where we want to go. I saw somebody had put up a clip from Iranian television where they said, America had planned for a short war. It takes time to resupply the aircraft carriers. And the guy went into actually a lot of detail about how the logistics of, American, battle groups. And I've seen them before, this is just stuff you can see online where, there's an aircraft carrier, then there's a bunch of supply ships, and there's a bunch of things to keep the kind of giant city working. And he's like, these guys just came from Venezuela. Now they're coming over here. They're going to be fatigued. And he just kept on listing all these things that are like, yeah, we're kind of using, the military here, the Navy and all these other armed forces in the United States, just kind of, just move over here. Now you do this, move over here. Now you do this. Like, we're not treating them like people. We're treating them like tools. And I am fully aware that that is no new thing for the American government to do to its own military. But in this particular case, without any clear reasoning for entering this conflict, and there's no clear exit strategy, what are they going to do? I mean, eventually, we're going to either need to basically declare that we're going to be doing this forever, or you can declare that you're not going to be doing this forever. And either one is a loss for the Americans. So I think the final question we need to ask is, why is this happening? And there's a number of reasons out there. And James O'Brien talked about this a couple days ago about why is this happening. Now, in my mind, there's only one reason this is happening. And this is not happening because of humanitarian goals, humanitarian beliefs. I don't think the Trump administration cares at all about the people of Iran. And he has basically said as much. He's disappointed in them for not magically overthrowing the regime. It's not about, I don't think it's about military dominance. I think it's 100% about the Epstein files. There are millions of files still yet to come out, but every day something new comes out, and every day it's a little bit worse. There are claims of videos that have come out from the Epstein files now of people, apparently children, being hit with metal bats. There's apparently a search on right now in New Mexico for bodies on Epstein's ranch. I mean, this is, the Epstein files, and this is only part of them, have been released for a few weeks, and there are people who troll through them every day, and kind of center it front and center in all these files is or a huge tranche of these files is Donald Trump. And apparently at Davos, which takes place in Switzerland in January, he said that, or the administration said, we're only focusing on the midterms. We are ending our entanglements in, foreign wars or foreign areas, and we're only going to be focusing on the midterms. And kind of out of nowhere, this attack happened. And it's I don't think it's escaping anyone's attention that this is almost directly related to the release of the Epstein files. And it's not escaping the attention of the Iranians, who put out an AI generated video on about the attack. It's not escaped the attention of the Chinese, who put out another video about just the Shield of America's nonsense. And it's obviously what the Trump administration wants you not to talk about, because if you mention it to Caroline Leavitt, or you mention it to, Hezgeth wouldn't, it wouldn't be mentioned to him. But over the past, week, the reactions to, these allegations, the reaction to the war has been absolutely, baffling, shocking, terrible. Specifically, let's take Hezgeth first. Hezgeth basically said, he went on a rant, and he's just like, why isn't the press more positive about this war? Why haven't you changed the way that you're talking about this? And then he openly said, I can't wait until CNN is taken over by David Ellison, his friend. These are the same people who took over CBS and, canned the Tonight Show, the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. It's clear that, there is no plan here other than dominance of the American people. It is clear that there is no plan other than just to tell everybody to shut the hell up and just do what you're told, and we will move on from this utter quagmire. But I think the last thing I want to say on this before I sign off is this. A few weeks ago, we opened up our podcast with the beginning of this Iranian war, and we talked about how a school was bombed, and we thought it was Israel who had done the bombing. Well, it's becoming more clear over these past few weeks that it may have been the Americans themselves who bombed this school, this girls' school that happened to be next or within an IRGC base. Now, for clarity, we have schools inside of bases as well. But more importantly, not to target them, or at least you shouldn't target them. And the original knee-jerk reaction of the American government, of Trump, was to say that Iran had done it to themselves. Now, Hesketh has announced an investigation into how this happened, which is a pretty big sign that eventually in the next few weeks, we're just going to say, sorry, didn't mean to, Iran's bad, and we have to get over it. But what I find to be most distressing about this entire affair is that 168 young girls or children had to die because the Trump administration wanted to distract you from what was going on in the Epstein files. If that doesn't boil your blood, I don't know what will. So I think that it's well within time to start calling for the impeachment of Donald Trump. It's well within time to call for the impeachment of Bondi, of Hesketh, of Rubio, this is probably the few times where I wish we had kind of a French style confidence vote. The confidence vote in France works like this. You kick out the government. And that is, you kick out the cabinet, and then you replace them with somebody else through an election. In the American terms, I think that we need to, hopefully, we if the midterms work out for the Democrats, they need to not twiddle their thumbs, not him and haw. There's impeachments, a lot of them. Even Supreme Court justices, the Supreme Court justices, which have ruled against democracy, ruled to give the president unlimited power, ruled to allow him to tariff whatever he wants. There are the people who are in the cabinet who have absolutely zero accountability right now because the American Congress is completely neutered. So that's one man's opinion. Hopefully you have your own. Let's end on some fun news. So in case you didn't know, I went to Western Illinois University, deep in the heart of Western Illinois, and our women's basketball team won the Ohio Valley Conference Championship, and we believe they will be getting a trip to the big dance, to March Madness coming up. Oh, and any time now, because we're in the middle of the month of March. So congratulations to the Leathernecks of Western Illinois. I wish I could see some of the games, and I hope that I hear nothing but good things between now and their inevitable victory as national champions. But I think that's enough for today. I'm going to have a listen to this and see if it makes any sense. And if it does, you'll be hearing it too. But as always, I'm Dr. Silverstein. Hopefully we'll see Dr. Armshaw next week. And I am a doctor who's not a doctor. Good night.